It's a very popular investment strategy to purchase a HMO. They can be very lucrative, but the key thing is they've got to be done right, and they've got to be purchased in the right place, and you've got to really do your research. There are lots of pitfalls you can fall into. Getting it wrong is disastrous, and it could cost thousands. I think the main thing people need to be aware of is there's lots of legislation. You need to be aware of HMO management standards. That will give you an understanding of fire safety, etc. But also HMO licensing, which will have a raft of conditions that landlords need to comply to. I often see landlords getting room sizes wrong, not understanding how much social and living space is meant to be in a building, not understanding how big a kitchen should be and how that's linked to the number of occupiers. The tenant type is naturally more transient in a HMO. People see the accommodation as stepping stone or temporary for work, etc. So actually it's a lot of hard work keeping it to be fully occupied. And that's why it's key to make sure you've bought it in the right place, that there's the demand for it, and that you manage the turnover of tenancies efficiently. So if somebody's leaving, the room needs to be advertised straight away. You need to make sure the property's clean and tidy, try and get that property filled as soon as possible. I think the dream type is a student. Configure a property as a HMO. It's let on one AST to a group of students. The downside is you do have an annual churn. That's moved people towards what we're often referred to as a professional HMO. And I think the word professional is somewhat misleading. What it essentially means is that we're not accepting people on housing benefits in this HMO. It's not trainee solicitors or nurses or doctors like is perhaps implied. It's more people on low income that are letting these rooms because they can't afford to let a one-bed flat. The danger of this type of HMO model is antisocial behaviour and the behaviour of the occupiers. You need to make sure you've got a regular cleaner there with a presence. I always recommend once a week. You do need to make sure you're inspecting regularly, your communal areas at least once a month, the bedrooms a minimum of every 3 months. And you do need to make sure you're setting the HMO up right with house rules, etc. Can't just leave this market to itself, otherwise your asset will very quickly become damaged. In a typical tenancy, you might take a full month's rent as a deposit, but on a HMO that could really inhibit your ability to fill the place. So landlords have become prone to taking a smaller deposit. They might just take £100 for the room, maybe £200. The problem with that is that a party that gets out of hand in your HMO could cost you about £5,000. I speak to some landlords that they want their tenants all to get along and be really good friends. They encourage them to congregate in communal areas and cook together and socialise together. Personally, I don't think this is a great idea. If you're developing your HMO, what I find works best is that if you minimise the social space, have a kitchen, have a dining table where they can eat together if they choose. But actually what you don't want is you don't want them all to become friends, because typically what happens is they get together and then they'll go and let a property together for probably less than what they're collectively letting the HMO for. An HMO that's full, a 6-bed facility. This one bad apple suddenly upsets everybody else. Those 5 tenants leave, leaving you with the bad apple, and then you're left with having to remove the bad apple from the HMO. All very costly, and also your property has now got massive void periods. If you're approaching a city that's got lots of Article 4s, that's where a local authority has designated an area as having too many multi-lets. And what tends to happen is we have a barrage of investors that will approach a local area. Everybody's buying HMOs. The market's strong at that point, and what we then naturally see is a decrease in the rent, probably lowers it by about 20%. My message to people investing in HMOs is be very careful, understand your market. I always say there are over 300 housing markets in this country. There is a housing cycle in each of those markets. Understand where HMO is at that moment in time as you're looking to invest. Understand the saturation level. Do your research. Are there Article 4s? If there are Article 4s, then where should you be doing your HMO? Where is the demand? Get involved in the specification of your building. Make sure it's optimised, that it's low cost for you to run, and make sure that it's being catered for the market that you're entering.